If you're heading to a friend's house for dinner or a party, don't just bring a naked bottle of wine. Let's either dress this up with a really cute bag, or I have a few other ideas in this video of things that you can whip up to make a personalized and unique hostess gift for your next event. Take a look. Who's ready for the holidays, for hostess gifts? Who is ready for a glass of wine? I got my hair up. I am ready to work. Let's make some wine bags. In today's episode, I'm going to show you a simple way to make reversible wine bags so you can have either side out. No circles. We're going to do box bottoms. We're going to tie it with a bow, and it's going to fit either one of these size wine bottles. I love that they're reversible. You can pick two different fabrics. You want to make sure the fabrics coordinate because you will see that inside fabric a little bit when you have it wrapped around your wine bottle. These wine bottle bags are going to have a box bottom, so no circle cutting. It's going to be nice and simple. So let's get started. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 12 inches wide, 16 inches high. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure you're paying attention and that you have the direction going on the 16 inch. And then when you go to sew it together, make sure you're paying attention to which side has the top of your pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to fold this in half, and then you're going to clip or pin, and we're going to sew down one long side and across the bottom. Again, making sure you're paying attention if your fabric is directional, that you leave the top open, because nobody wants a wine bag where everything on the fabric is upside down. Now you're just going to press the seams open on the long end of both pieces of fabric. You don't need to go all the way down because we will be trimming off that point. And while you're at your ironing board, take it and fold down the top edge 1/2 inch. And this doesn't have to be super exact. You just want to make sure both halves are pretty consistent. And you're going to press that as well. This way we can get all of our ironing done at once. Now we're going to make our box bottoms, and I love using this 1.5 inch wide Cute Cuts ruler because that is exactly how far from the tip that we are going to mark our sewing line. But first we need to get it all lined up. Now I've made quite a few of these wine bags, and I have created a system that makes it go quickly and evenly. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up this seam line on one of your grid lines of your cutting mat. So you have the seam line up here, and then you have the point where it seamed right there. So we have both of those on that 10-inch mark. Doesn't matter which mark, just put it on a mark. Then you're going to flatten the bottom. So see how it creates that square, and you're going to make sure that that stitch line is lining up here, the stitch line here, to that seam line there. And then also making sure that, that everything just stays straight on that line. Sometimes you need to adjust it because sometimes you'll put it down and it'll be like a little bit wider here and there. And so I have found this is the quickest and easiest way to get this done. And I'm all about getting projects done quickly whenever possible. So now we're going to take our 1.5 inch ruler, or just whatever ruler you have, and you're going to measure 1.5 inches from the tip to where we're going to sew. And then I'm just going to mark this. I'm just using a regular pen because this is going to be totally inside, encapsulated, so you'll never see that pen mark again. Then I'm going to put a little pin in that. Cute little Riley Blake pin, I love it. Now I'm going to grab this without moving it. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to put that down because we already have that all lined up nicely. And we're going to mark from the other side. Now you're just going to repeat with the other half of your wine bag. Now we're just going to sew along all 4 of those lines. And this is definitely an area where you can daisy chain them, meaning you don't have to take them totally off, just sew one to the other. And if you're doing a lot of wine bags, this really does save you some time and thread. So are wine bags something you'd like to see more of? Would you like to see how to do them with a drawstring inside? A little bit more complicated? Leave me a note in the comments and let me know if that's something that's of interest. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to trim 1/4 inch from that line. You can use your rotary cutter, but I'm just going to do this with scissors so I don't have to keep moving my cameras all over my room. Now the next step is to get these wrong sides together. So you're going to take one and turn it right side out. It does not matter at all which one because these wine bags will be reversible. So you don't have to make any decisions yet about which side you want out. Then we're going to put one bag inside the other and we're going to match these seams. You don't really have to worry too much down here. The main thing is to get these seams matched at the top. So the seam line and the fold, and then I'm just going to put a little clip there. And then we're just lining up this top edge. Because this is reversible and because whoever wants a snarl of a knot in their thread, I'm going to be pulling up my bobbin thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot down, put my needle down, holding this thread, the top thread, and then I'm going to pick the needle up and I'm going to give it a little tug and I'm going to grab that bobbin thread. So now I'm holding on to both the top and the bobbin. And I'm going to put it under that foot, and I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to do a little knot. Now we're going to stitch all the way around, and I usually hold on to that thread until I've taken maybe 2 stitches just to make sure it doesn't get sucked back down under by some gremlin in the sewing machine. And now I'm just going to top stitch all the way around. And now that your wine bag is done, you just have to decide which side you want to be on the outside. So let's just flip this. Put the red on the outside. I think that's just going to be beautiful for fall, for a fall hostess gift, for Thanksgiving. Put that wine in there, and then I just cut a piece of 1-inch ribbon. You can use anything. I'm just going to tie it right there. And now it is ready to go. So again, let me know in the comments how and when you're going to use these. If you want to learn a couple more techniques for wine bags, because there's so many different ways we can go with these. This, super simple, fast, easy, great for beginners. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a wine gift bag with a drawstring. I'd previously done a tutorial for how to do a reversible wine bag where you would just tie a bow around it, but I've had a couple requests for how to do it with a drawstring. This is going to have a box bottom, which makes it nice and easy to put together. It is going to be lined, but it isn't reversible because the drawstring comes out on one side. So let's get started. Let's talk about the supplies we need to make this drawstring wine bag. First, you're going to need your basic sewing supplies, a ruler, cutting mat, rotary cutter. I also like to use this little square. I'll show you what we're going to use that for in a moment. Pins or clips, totally up to you, whichever you prefer. I'm going to do most of my sewing with white thread, but then I also do like to match my top and bobbin threads to my fabric so that when we're sewing the drawstring channel, it kind of blends in and doesn't stick out from the fabric. Then we need a safety pin and some cord, or you can also use twine or ribbon, totally up to you what you want to use. Finally, you're going to need a heat erasable pen, or you can also use chalk. I am just a huge fan of these and think every sewist should have that in their stockpile. Oh, also a seam ripper. So let's move some things and I will show you how to get started with the fabrics. For each wine bag, you're going to need 4 pieces of fabric. Each are 6.5 inches wide by 16 inches tall. This will make the bag stop basically at the top of an average wine bottle. If you want it to be taller, just make it 17, 18, however many inches, just add inches here, not to the width. If you are using a directional fabric, make sure your direction is going up and down in the long direction, because if we had cut it the other way, we would have flowers going sideways on the wine bag. Not quite as nice. This is going to be the lining. I just decided that I wanted my lining stripes to be going horizontally. They could also go vertically. So take direction into consideration when you are choosing your fabrics. Now I'm going to place these right sides together, making sure the direction is the same. So we don't want one side to have the flowers upside down and one side to have them right side up. We want them in the same direction. And then we are going to place them right sides together. Now, because this is the top, I'm going to flip it around so it is easier for me to draw and cut out the notches that we're going to be doing for the boxed bottom. There's 2 ways to do boxed bottom. You can cut notches, you can just sew it together, flatten it, and then cut the bottom. But for this project, we are going to do it this way. we're going to cut out a 1.5-inch square from both sides on the bottom of the fabric. And I say bottom because, again, I'm using directional fabric, so I have to be very aware of the direction so that I don't have flowers upside down on my finished wine bag. So I'm just using this heat erasable pen, drawing these 2 squares, and then I'm going to take scissors and I'm going to cut that out. Do you have a preferred way to make box bottoms? Either basically pre-cutting it or doing it after you have sewn your bag together? Let me know in the comments what you prefer. I kind of go back and forth, but I do like this way because it's going to make it really easy in the step where we're putting that box together. So this is the outside, and I'm just going to use clips, and I'm going to clip this together. We are going to sew both of these long sides and across here. We are not going to sew in these notches yet. We are not going to sew across the top. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my lining fabric. I'm going to put right sides together. I'm going to draw the little notches that we need to cut out to make that box bottom, and then I'm going to cut those out. I prefer to cut these notches with scissors because if you use a rotary cutter and overcut a little bit too much, you may cut into part of the bag. So I prefer to have it not as perfect, but not go past these points. Now, because this is the lining and the way we're going to put this together, I want to make sure on one of the long sides, I leave about 3 inches open for turning. And I like to do that about 1.5 inches to 2 inches up from the bottom where the notch starts. So I'm just going to draw a line there and there. That's 3 inches apart so that I know not to sew this section. Now I'm going to clip this together and then we will get this to the sewing machine. Now I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. So I sewed down the sides and across the bottom, leaving a space open for turning on the lining. And then I have also pressed the seams open, and I pressed just like it was sewn where that is open. So now it is time to turn these notches into boxed corners. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab both sides of your fabric right by that corner, and you're going to pull out. And you'll notice that it just pops right from this cut corner to a straight line. You're going to match the seams and pin or clip. And then you can pin or clip the 2 sides if you want to. It's pretty short, so it's pretty easy to just make sure that's lined up at your sewing machine. Totally up to you. So you're going to do that for all 4 boxed corners, making sure that you open that seam. This is why I really do like to do box bottoms like this if you're going to have seams on both sides, because it just automatically lines right up. You don't have to flatten it, make sure things are straight. When I did the reversible wine bag, we did the box bottoms a little bit different because we used 1 piece of fabric for the outside and 1 piece of fabric for the lining, and we just folded it over so there was only 1 seam. So when you have a fold on one side and a seam on the other side, this method doesn't work as well because one side is it's not going to pop straight and have everything line up properly. Now I'm going to take this back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam along all 4 of those box bottoms. Moving right along, we have our 2 bags sewn together, so the lining and the outside. Now we are going to leave the lining wrong side out. We are going to turn the outside right side out. And then I'm going to put the outer fabric inside the lining fabric, and we are going to line up the seams on both sides. You don't have to be super precise down here. We're focusing on this top edge, which is what we are going to sew together next. So I'm just going to start by matching the seams. And then you're just going to match this raw edge and pin or clip around. It's this edge that we're focused on. Now I'm going to take it back to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew all the way around. Don't have to leave any opening because we have the opening down here in the lining for turning. I sewed all the way around the top, leaving no opening. Now I'm going to find the seam that has an opening in the lining, and we are going to turn this right side out. Next, you're ready to close this opening. You can either hand stitch it, or you can just fold this and just run a quick stitch on your machine really close to the edge. So you can see when I do the machine stitching, it does create a little bit of a bubble, right? It's not super flat, so it is noticeable, but again, it is going to be on the inside bottom of a not reversible wine bag. So to me, that's totally fine. If you want to hand stitch, go for it. You do you. Now we are going to just push the lining inside the outer fabric. And this is when you do want to be a little bit more careful and deliberate with opening those boxed corners of the lining. You can't see, that's what I'm doing in there with my fingers, kind of stretching that out. And now we need to just get this edge where the lining meets the outer fabric up top. So I just kind of do it with my fingers first, get that lined up. Then I'm going to press this so that it's nice, so you're not seeing the lining when you're looking at the front, and you're not seeing the front when you're looking at the lining. So once I do that, I will be right back. The next thing we need to do is sew around the bag twice to make this channel for the drawstring. And I'm just showing you one that I already made so you know what our end goal is. So we're going to have 2 inches above that kind of flops out, and that's where you'll see the lining. And then we're going to sew 3/4 inches down from there. That will fit most things. If you're using a really wide ribbon, just adjust. There are 2 ways to do it, but I'm going to show you my favorite way, which I think is the easiest. So we are going to grab a ruler, and we are going to grab our heat erasable pen again. Now, whether you draw on the outside or the inside depends on your sewing machine. If you have a removable arm, like a removable extension table that you can pull off, and you will be able to put this bag so that it goes around the table and your foot and needle go on top of the outside, you're going to draw on the outside. My machine doesn't do that, so I'm actually going to be doing this, and my foot and needle are going to be in here, and I'll flip it like that. You'll see. Because I have to do it that way, I'm going to turn it inside out again because I need the lines where I'm sewing. I just have to have this front part flat. So I'm going to line it up on my grid because my ruler is 1.5 inches and I need to mark down 2 inches. And I'm going to draw a line. Now, don't freak out because what's beautiful about these pens is you can see it great to sew on. And then once we've sewn, we're just going to use heat of an iron, and that is going to disappear like magic. I absolutely love these pens. Highly recommend you get the variety pack with multiple colors if you don't have any of these, because sometimes colors like this doesn't show up well on a navy blue. So then I use the red because that will show up better. Because I want the stitching to just blend in with my fabric, I'm going to change my top thread to yellow. This is my best match for this. And I'm going to use this color in the bobbin that's going to disappear into the outer fabric. And that is only because of the way I'm having to sew, where I'm going like this. If your machine allows the machine to go in here and the top is here, you would put this on your top thread and whatever matches your lining as your bobbin. I'm going to start with the line closest to the top edge, just before a seam. And because the knot is going to be on the outside of my bag, I'm going to be more careful about how I start and stop here. So I'm going to line this up, put my foot down. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to be holding the thread, pick the needle up, and then I'm going to give it a little pull so that I can get that bobbin thread pulled through. Sometimes it doesn't come very far, so I'm going to grab tweezers, just pull that through. Now I have both the bobbin and the top threads in my hand. I'm going to put them under the foot, and I'm going to hold them kind of tight while I start. And since I do need to go forward and back, I'm not going to really knot. I'm just going to do the forward and back right now over that seam. Now I've gotten to the second seam, so I want to make sure I remember to go forward and back just to really attach the stitches that are under the seam. Now I'm going to do the same exact thing on the second line. Again, pulling that bobbin thread up, doubling back over the seam, doubling back over the second seam as well. Now the lines we drew are still there, so all we need to do is hit those lines with a little bit of heat, just so that you can see it better. I'm going to turn it inside out again. And you might have to hold the heat on there a little bit longer when the lines are under thread and stitch marks, but it goes away really quickly. So now I'm going to turn that right side out again. And now we are going to very carefully open our drawstring channel. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your favorite seam ripper and you're going to very carefully pull out the stitches in the outer fabric in between these two stitch lines. Now you don't want to just jam in there because we do not want to pull out the stitches in the lining seaming, which are just below the stitches in the outer stitching. So careful, careful, and slow. So just slip that in there. You can push forward a little, but you can't go all the way because you don't want to rip this either. So you're just going to start to open it and then just grab one stitch at a time. So now we have our opening on the one side for the drawstring, and now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. As I mentioned before, I'm going to use white nylon paracord, I believe they call this. So grab whatever you want to use for your drawstring and cut 2 pieces that are 19 to 20 inches long. Now I love this, but one thing you will notice if you work with it, I'll put it over the fabric so you can see it, is it will fray, but you can melt it because it's nylon. So I'm just going to take a Bic lighter, be really careful if you use fire, and just hold that flame on the end and you can see it melt. So now they're going to be good to go. Now we're going to take a safety pin. I'm just using a quilting safety pin. You can use a regular size as well. Put it through whatever drawstring you're going to use. And you can start on either side and you're just going to push that all the way through. We're going to pull it out the same side that it went in. Take the pin off. I'm going to line up those ends and then I'm just going to tie that in a knot. But you'll see with the 19 inches, your bag can lay flat and your drawstring is still going to be out. Now we're going to do the same thing with the second string, but you're going to start on the opposite side. So you're going to start and end on the side that doesn't have string coming out of it now. And now your bag is done. So you're just going to put that in there and then you grab both sides and pull. And you have a very cute gift bag. In today's tutorial, I am going to show you how to whip up really quick and easy round coasters. This is very similar to the square coasters that I showed you before. There's a link in the description below. In that video, I actually used a fall fabric, but my sister kind of commandeered them. Let me know in the comments if you have a sister or anyone else who likes to steal your projects, but looks great in the Hanukkah fabric as well. It's basically made out of 5 pieces of fabric, 1 for the back, 4 for the front. Today's tutorial, I'm going to be using the Piece on Earth fabric by My Mind's Eye, brought to you by Riley Blake Designs. They're pre-cut into 5-inch squares, which makes this a breeze. Then you're also going to need a 4.5-inch piece of fusible fleece or batting. I'm a huge fan of pinking shears for clipping curves. It's going to save you so much time. And then I'm just using a bowl as a template for the circle. The main requirement is it needs to be a little bit smaller than your fabric. This is 4 inches actually, and it ended up being the perfect size because we're going to draw a line, we're going to sew on that line, and then we need enough fabric still around it that we can grab our pinking shears and cut that to size. So let me show you how to get this done. And we are going to do a lined version and an unlined version. A lot of people use it as a built-in wine glass coaster / marker. So you just slide the wine glass in between those 4 layers. And if you do a variety of designs, it's going to help people know which glass is theirs if they leave it and go wandering. So as I was thinking about doing that with the wine glasses, I started thinking, well, it's not so cute with the fusible fleece in there. So maybe we should make them lined. So I did try one where I put lining on the inside too. That makes it use an extra piece of fabric. So you would use 6 of the squares instead of 5. And it's a little bit thicker, a little bit harder to cut with the pinking shears, but totally doable and a little bit more finished. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick our fabrics. To make a great coaster, it's best to use like 2 darks and 2 lights so that you can see the difference. So that's going to be the back. These are going to be the 4 for the front. That's going to be the back. These are going to be the 4 for the front. Now I've taken the fabrics that I'm going to use for the back and I've taken them off of the ironing board. Now we're going to take the 8 other pieces, so 4 for each coaster, and we are simply going to fold them in half and press. Now, when you're pressing something really directional like these birds, you can decide if you're going to want them to be going up and down or sideways. Sometimes I make this decision by looking at both of them folded to see which one actually has a decent piece in one of the quarters. So it's kind of like that's going to show, or that's going to show, or like that's going to show, especially once you cut off that circle. So if that's a half, kind of say, I'll do that. Just have that bird head. So I'm going to press it that way. When you have a pattern more like a stripe or a snowflake, there's less thinking involved. Okay, now we're going to press the fusible fleece, the fusible part, onto the wrong side of your back fabric. Just going to follow the manufacturer's instructions on that. We're going to take our bowl and place it in the center of the fleece. And then you can take any kind of a pen. You can use heat erasable pen or a regular pen, because you will never see this again. And you're just going to trace around your bowl. So now we have our sewing line. Now I'm going to take some fabric clips and we're going to organize these and get them ready for sewing. So for the one that is going to be unlined, we're going to take the fusible fleece down, the backing fabric face up, and then we are going to organize these 4 pieces around the square, making sure the folded side is on the inside. And also making sure we have the light colors and the dark colors in opposite corners. So you're going to put the first 3 down and you're going to be like, uh-oh, 2 light ones are together there, Tara. But remember, these are 2. So now we need to overlap this. So you do that, and then you fold that one back, place that under. You want to make sure all of your folds, again, are on the inside, have all of these edges together. Now I'm going to do clips. And you might notice I'm putting them upside down. They're flat on one side to go along your sewing machine and curved on the other side. But because we're going to be sewing from the back where we drew the circle, when I put them on here, it looks like I'm doing them upside down, but it's going to be perfect when we take it to the sewing machine. And so I just want to make sure I have each of these sections clipped where these fabrics overlap. So we're going to take it and we're going to sew around that circle. But first, let's get our lined one set up. To do a lined circle coaster where it has fabric in here and not the fleece or batting showing, you're going to need 6 pieces of fabric. So we have pressed the 4, pressed the fleece onto the back of this one, and now we are going to take another full square. We're going to put it right side up. So the wrong side of the fabric is against the fleece. You gotta pay attention when you're putting this down. You wanna get your bowl pretty well centered because we need to have room to use our pinking shears and cut around this circle once we sew it together on the line that I'm drawing for the second time. And in this instance, you do want to use a heat erasable pen or a chalk line because this is on the outside of the fabric, so it might show. Now I'm going to turn that over so that the line is down. Now I'm going to organize these 4 fabrics just like we did on this one that's just going to have fleece. If you want to be really particular about what is in each quadrant of your coaster, you can set it up to look like the front. Usually when you lay these down, you're seeing the back as you lay them down, which doesn't matter at all when you're doing patterns like this. But when you get into more specific things like, oh, do I want this bird or this fern showing? Or do I like this bird head? Or do I really want just a bird tail? That answer is no to that. So I'm going to lay this out so that we're looking at the front. So we want this to be the top of the coaster. So that means that we're going to then put these fabrics right on top of there. And then just so I can make sure I clip the exact right parts, I'm going to turn that over really carefully. Make sure that's all lined up, flipping and clipping it. Flip and clip. Okay, so make sure that's all nice and flat. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew these 2 circles. Because this is a curve, a pretty small circle 4-inch circle and we want it to turn and be as round as possible when we press it, you want to use a small stitch length. So I'm going to actually use a 1.8. That's going to give us more points to the curve so that when we clip this with the pinking shears and turn it, it's going to give us the best shape possible. And I'm sewing right on the line, not a 1/4 inch from the line, just right on that line. I also don't sew too quickly when I'm doing a circle like this because often if you go a little too quickly, you're less likely to have a really smooth curve, which is going to affect how it flips and presses in the end. I moved the ironing board for a moment because things are about to get a little bit linty. We're going to take my pinking shears and I'm going to cut around the circle through all of the layers, making sure I do not cut that stitch line. Now this is a lot easier to do on the 5 layers than on the 6, but it's doable on both. So what I have discovered is you want to keep your cutting to the back half of your pinking shears when you're cutting through this many layers, because here's what happens. If you try and go too far forward, it just bends right in your scissors. Then you got to ratchet them up. So you really need to use your back teeth. And these are pretty new scissors. So it's not that I've been using these for years and they're getting dull. I think it really just has to do with the thickness of the fabric once you get to those front teeth. But knowing that you only want to cut about halfway definitely saves you some folded fabric. Now you can see this one we're going to have to cut a lot more because you can't go even as far as you could on the other one. This is my favorite way of clipping curves for projects. The other way would be to take scissors, cut about a 1/4 inch, and then do a bunch of little cuts, making sure that you haven't hit the fabric. To me, that's a lot harder on my thumb. And if you've been sewing for long, you know that that is often a problem area for people who sew for years and years as you end up with carpal tunnel. So you want to use as many things that are good for your hands, and having something squeezing like this versus that other thing repetitively is a lot easier on your tendon. So you just take your time and get around this circle. Now we have those both cut, and we're going to turn them over, and then we're just going to flip them right side out. As you're flipping this and getting that curve, you want to make sure you're getting your finger all the way in, because sometimes there's 2 layers, like right here, there's 2 layers of fabric. Before you hit that fleece, you want to make sure you're pushing that seam out at the fleece layer and not at one of the folded fabric layers. That's going to give you your best circle. And I just rub along that seam with my finger. For this size and this shape, that works great. You can use a turning tool as well, but look at how great that is. And then I just kind of jiggle the seams with my fingers to get them out, and we have a nice circle. So we'll do it with this one. Then we're going to get that ironing board back. We're going to iron them, and these are going to be done. See how easy that was to put together. So you could whip up a bunch of these if you're having a dinner party. These make great stocking stuffers, gifts for teachers, neighbors. These are also great to sew and sell. You could wrap them up in sets of 4 or 6 and sell them at craft fairs. Obviously good for all year, depending on what fabric you use. So now I have my wine glass, and I just need somebody to bring me a bottle. I think I'm in the mood for a Merlot. Let's talk about the supplies that you need, and I'm going to be demonstrating a larger 9-inch fabric bread basket. So I'm going to be using this circle ruler by Lori Holt of Be in My Bonnet from Riley Blake Designs. I love it. I may never do a project that doesn't have the right size ruler again. I'm going to show you how easy that is to use. Then I'm also going to be using this rotating cutting mat, which is going to help me do this quickly and easily. This is by Sue Daly of Riley Blake Designs, rotary cutter, ruler. Then I'm going to be using a piece of batting. This is just extra batting from a quilting project. You could also use fusible fleece if you want to, but remember that if you're going to want to put these in the microwave, you need to make sure everything you use is 100% cotton. I'm not going to be putting mine in the microwave, so I'm just using the scraps. I'm not 100% sure what this is, but look at that. See how that I cut that perfect circle already, but I'm going to show you how to use this in a minute. Then you need 1/3 yard of 2 coordinating fabrics. So I'm going to be using this for one side, and this for the other side. These are both the, 2 of the 3 prints that go with the December monthly placemat program that I designed for Riley Blake Designs. And these baskets are reversible, so I can have either side out, and then you just throw it in the wash if it gets a little bit dirty. So I've pre-cut these 2 strips to 28 3/4 inches by 11 inches high. On my blog, I have directions for how to do a 6-inch bread basket, which is smaller, more for 2 people or individual. I just did this bigger one more for a group. And then I also show you on the blog, if you want to use a different circle, different size circle, how to figure out how long you need these sides to be and how to figure out how tall you want them to be. So that's helpful. And then there's also, you can go grab a free template for a 6 or 9-inch circle if you don't have or don't want to invest in these rulers, but oh my gosh, I love them. So these are the 2 extra pieces from the end after I cut this to size, and we're going to use these to cut our circles. I'm going to layer them and I'm going to cut them both at the same time. Oh, and then you need clips or pins, but I'm going to move those out of the way for now. So you either need like a rotating mat or one that you can turn. Mine seems to want to pivot on the table more than it wants to rotate. You're just going to hold your hand down on your ruler, and then you're going to go, and I like to start at one of the lines so that I know where I started, because I pivot about every quarter. So you just go really slowly and just move your rotary cutter along the edge. And then twist. If you try and go too far around, you might strain your wrist a little bit, or you might start to veer off of the edge of the circle, but you can always fix that. But this gives me perfect circles every time. And voila, perfect circles. I love that thing. And there is a link below the video if you want to get yourself some circle rulers as well. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to, and it doesn't matter which one, you're going to pick one circle, put it face down, and then you're going to put the batting on the wrong side. And then we're just going to take that to the sewing machine and quilt that a little bit. I usually just do a few lines. This is going to help give the basket a little more stability than if it was just 100% fabric. And I like my baskets to be a bit floppy so they can fold over and keep the bread warm if you want to. So I'm just going to be using fabric for the sides. But if you want it to have a little bit more shape and stability, you could also add batting and quilt one of the sides. But I'm not going to be doing that in this demo. So I'm just going to sew probably 5 lines down this to just keep the batting in place with the fabric. So when I wash it, it's not going to get all out of shape. Now I'm going to sew the seam for each of the side pieces. We folded it in half, right sides together, match these long edges, and then I'm just going to do that with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to take the 2 sides to the ironing board and press that seam open, and then we're going to pin them together. So we're going to go back to the workspace. All right, I pressed each of these seams open. So now we have 2 tubes, basically, that are going to be the sides. This one circle, and then this circle quilted to the batting. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to show you on the batting half, is first we're going to fold this circle in half. We're going to figure out where the quarter marks are. Now I'm going to fold it again. I'm going to match those marks. Press down a little bit so when I open it, I can see where I'm marking for the others. So we have divided this into 4 quadrants. Now we're going to do the same thing with this. So I'm going to take the seam on one side and then just flatten it out. And I'm going to put a mark right where that fold is. It doesn't have to be super, super exact, but close. Now I'm going to match that mark to the seam. Make sure the edges are lined up so that we have it flattened out straight. And now we're going to mark these 2 spots. So if you just kind of finger press that, You can open it and you'll see, maybe. Okay, you can open it and you can see where that was. Okay, now this is the most time-consuming part of this project. And if you're gonna make a bunch, I highly recommend you get a bunch to this point and then go watch TV while you clip it all together. So right sides together, we're going to match these marks, and you can pin or clip. I like using clips. All right, so now you have those evened out, and now you're just going to clip all along the curve, kind of easing the fabric in if need be. All right, so that's one. And now you just do the same thing for the second side. All right, so we've been both pinned together. Now we're gonna go sew these and then put them together. So we're gonna go back to the sewing machine. After doing a few of these, I got some tips for you to make it easier. So the circle is flat. This is eased in a little bit. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna place the circle flat down, if you can, if you have an extender table on your sewing machine, and then you're just going to mush that part to the middle. That's gonna make it a lot easier to just zoom around and sew this circle with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you want to trim a little bit, you can. I don't actually go around and snip the curve because it's just a floppy bread basket. So I think it turns and looks fine. Just like that. So I just leave it like that. And now I'm going to do the second one, and then we will put the two of them together. Now that I have both of them sewn together, I'm going to turn one of them right side out. I'm going to do the one that doesn't have the batting. Just kind of run my fingers along that stitch line. And now I'm going to put it inside the other one, right? So it's right sides together. And then I'm going to match, where's my seam? I'm going to match the seams in the bag. So I'm going to start down at the bottom with these two seams. I'm going to clip that so those seams are lined up. And you're just going to get it all lined up, and you're going to pin all the way around the top, and we are almost done. All right, now we're going to sew around the top edge, leaving a few inches open to turn. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I always do 2 clips together so I know when to stop, so I don't get overzealous and just keep going. So if I'm going to stop there, I'm going to start here. So now I'm coming up to my double clip, so I know I need to stop. And now I'm just going to turn it right side out through this opening. And then you're going to push one side into the other. Put one side into the other, and then you're going to make sure these seams, like where this is sewn together, is out, and we're going to press that so that you don't see the one fabric from the other side. So you're going to go to your ironing board and do that, and then we're going to come back, top stitch, and finish this off. Okay, now I have that pressed, and I've pressed the opening under, so when we top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch from the edge, you're not going to see where that opening was for turning. Now you can be done here, but one thing I do like to do is I like to run one stitch line along the bottom, along the inside, just to secure the lining and the outer quilted bottom. So what you need to do is you need to, and I always do it like just the opposite direction as I did those lines. So you need to make sure the circles are lined up properly before you do this. And then you're just going to ease your fabric sides through. Pull this back to the edge, and now I'm just going to run a straight line. That just really helps keep this together and makes it a little easier to hold its shape after you wash it. So now it's done. It's just this cute, floppy French bread basket. You can fold it down, fill it up. If you have warm rolls, you just put it in and keep that covered just to keep the warmth in. You could put cookies in here. So many things that you can do with these. And then they're also reversible. So if your decor isn't going with that lime green so well one day, you can have the white as the main. And you could do a little cuff. Have the green showing. So many ways to use these. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make fabric trays with snaps. So when you store them, they store flat. This will take up barely any space at all, so you can make them for all the fun occasions. Make them for the holidays, make them just because, make them for your friends, make them for teachers. Super, super simple, beginner-friendly project. I demonstrate how to use this big size, which is perfect for rolls or bread at a dinner party. Use them at picnics, things like that. But I'm going to show you how to fussy cut, how to take a print, decide exactly what you want in the center, and leave nothing to chance. Otherwise, this is all straight stitching, a little bit of ironing, so easy. Who wants to get started on these amazing fabric baskets or trays? Let's start by talking about supplies. Here is everything we're going to need, except for the ironing board and sewing machine, to make these cute little fabric baskets. So I'm going to be using fabric clips. You can also use pins. Of course, rotary cutter, we need 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to be using cam snaps. I'm going to show you how to use washi tape to create guidelines that are going to be really helpful to make this quick and easy. A turning tool. And then if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get this for free with this chart and these very handy templates. So what I did was I cut them out and I laminated them, and then I can just use them over and over again. You basically take the awl that comes with your cam snap set, push it through the circles that are marked for where to place those snaps on these baskets. So I'll show you how those work. And again, you can sign up for my newsletter and get that. There'll be a link below this video to do that. I also have the full pattern with lots of pictures and written description in my Etsy shop, so I will give you that link as well. So for each fabric basket, you need 2 pieces of fabric, and I show you how to do 3 sizes, either using a 15-inch square, 12-inch square, or 8-inch square, and I'm going to be demoing the 15-inch square. So I have a 15-inch square. This is what I'm going to use for the outside of my basket. Then I have a 15-inch square, or slightly under 15-inch square, of fusible fleece. I usually use the Pellon 987F. And then I have a big piece of my main print from my Better to Wake at the Lake collection, and I'm going to show you how to fussy cut this so you have exactly what you want in the center of your basket. So like this is the small one. So I'm going to show you how to put exactly what you want in the bottom part once it's snapped together by fussy cutting this piece of fabric. You can use a regular ruler, but what I'm going to use is this nice big 16.5-inch square from Creative Grids. It just makes this process faster and easier. You can use a regular ruler and the measurements on your mat if you don't have this, but sometimes it's fun to see how different tools work and how they make your life faster. Okay, first we need to decide exactly what we want on the inside of our basket and what portion of this fabric we want in the center. I'm going to look at this chart. So we're going to cut a 15-inch square.
The inside square is going to measure 9.5 inches. So you need to be paying attention to both of those numbers as we work with this ruler. So one thing that's cool about this ruler is it has, in the white circles, it has inches, 10, 9, 8, 7. In the black circles, it marks the ½ inch. So if you were cutting a square that was 15.5 inches, you would work off of these two sides, but I'm going to work off of these because we're cutting a 15-inch square. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to put it right along that 15-inch mark on both directions, because then we're going to see exactly what we're cutting and we won't be distracted or confused by that extra 1.5 inches. Okay, so now this is going to be our square. We just disregard everything past the painter's tape. Now, you could also do that for the height of the side. So the sides are going to be 2.5 inches. Let's try it. This would be good to do if you were going to make a bunch of these, but it's a lot of tape if you're just making one. So anyway, if we want to mark this, we would do it 2.5 inches from that tape on all 4 sides. So this is going to be, well, I'm going to put it on the inside. Let's see. I don't want to block what we're looking at. So I'm putting this to this side of the 2.5 inch mark. And I like using this tape because it doesn't have a lot of adhesive on it, so it is not going to leave any residue on my ruler. And I'm also going to show you how to use it on the sewing machine when we are sewing these lines. And we don't even have to go all the way over because we're basically just taping out this center section, which is what we're going to be fussy cutting. Okay, so how cool is that? We now see the full size that we're going to cut, and now we can see what is going to be in the center. And when I say in the center, that means everything that's inside this yellow or orange, whatever you want to call that square, is what is going to show on the bottom of your basket or tray when you snap it together. So you can decide what part you want. You love this saying the best days. The best days include sunshine and lake water. Then you can put that right in the center. And then you can also see what else you're going to get. So let's just take a look at some other options that we have on this piece. And I purposefully cut this larger than 15 inches so that I would have some leeway. If I move this like this, I'm going to have the whole bass, this saying, the go jump in a lake, all these things. There's not a lot that's going to be cut off, but it will be on the sides. So remember, everything you're seeing here is going to fold up the sides. So it's not like we're cutting all this off, it's just going to fold up. So this is what I've decided I want. Now, because this is so big, I couldn't put it on a rotary mat, but I'm making sure that everything is on my cutting mat. And I'm gonna start by just getting this whole thing smaller. I know this is not the edge that we're going to be using, but I need to get started. So that just helped me get this piece out of my way because it's a lot to spin around. Now we need to cut these 2 sides, and then we're going to turn it 180 degrees to get the 15-inch square. We're going to line up the sides that we just cut with the painter's tape. Or if this is the only one you're going to do, you can take that off and line it up with the actual 15-inch line. But I'm just double checking that that's correct. And I'm going to keep this tape on here so I can whip up a few more for holiday gifts. So again, I'm just going to keep this flat, and I'm going to cut these sides off. Very cool tool. I love how we can tape that up, make it nice and easy. So doing this fussy cutting is the most complicated and slightly time-consuming way to make these baskets, but I wanted to show you how it worked because you're going to be able to easily figure out how to do it with just 2 pieces of fabric where you really do not have to worry about how you cut it. I just cut these fish and I cut this design. They're both random patterns, so where you cut doesn't matter. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my ironing board and I'm going to fuse the fleece to the back side of the outer fabric. You can do it to either fabric, the inner or the outer, because we are going to quilt this a little bit to make sure that it stays really well. I'm going to go fuse this following the manufacturer's instructions, and I will be right back. Now this piece of fusible fleece is well secured to the wrong side of my outer fabric. I'm going to grab my clips. I'm going to put my fabrics right side together. Just line those up. And now I am going to clip. You can also pin because we are just going to sew all the way around the outside of this 1/4 inch from the edge. We're going to leave 3 to 4 inches open on one of the sides so that we can turn this right side out once we get it sewn together. So super easy. One thing I often like to do is I'll use an opposite color so that I know to stop, because I'm going to start about here. And then if I just get on a roll and all of a sudden I'll see red, I'll be like, oh, time to stop, so that we have room to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to sew around 1/4 inch from the edge. I am using a 1/4 inch foot, so I can just line that edge up right with the edge of my foot. Now my foot also has these little lines on it, tells me where the 1/4 inch is. So I line that up as close as possible to the edge, maybe one more stitch, leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and pivot. And sometimes it's a little too far or not quite far enough, but you do it as close as possible and then keep going. And these baskets are so handy. Some people call them a tray. I usually call it a basket because I use them a lot for rolls and bread on the table. They don't have high sides, but they're great for little dinner rolls, for Thanksgiving, for picnics, things like that. So many ways to use them. This could be a quick and easy gift for the holidays, to thank someone. Let me know in the comments how you plan on using these. Are you going to use them for yourself? Are you going to sew and sell? Or are you going to give them as gifts? I'd love to know. And now that we're getting to the red one, I know that I am close to where I began and I need to leave some space to turn it. So I'm just going to go pretty much to there and then back and forth again. Before we turn this right side out, we want to trim each of the corners to get rid of any bulk so that we can get as nice of a point as possible when we turn this right side out. Traditionally, when people trim corners, they usually just go straight across with one cut, making sure you do not hit your stitch line. So you get that angle like that. But you'll see when you turn this right side out, you have all of this fabric that is going to be on the inside, and it can get a little bit bulky. So I'll show you with a fresh corner, my preferred way. I like to do 2 cuts that goes down a little bit further to get rid of more of this fabric here. But again, making sure you don't get that corner. So I'm going to do one like this. And then I'm going to do the other like that. So you'll see it's a bit more fabric that has come off of this corner. So here's a comparison. This is the straight across and this is this corner. So this is going to fold and give us a much better point. So I'm just going to fix this one to my preferred way, but I wanted to show you the difference. And I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. This is so big, it's nice and easy. You can get your whole hand in there and just run your fingers along the sides, along all the edges, and use your finger to get that point out as much as you can to start. And then I will show you how to very gently use a turning tool to make even better corners. You'll see that's pretty rounded if you're just using your finger. But if I use this Riley Blake turning tool, and there's lots of different kinds, you can even use a chopstick. So I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to very slowly and gently push along both sides. So I'm pushing this way and this way to get that corner out as much as I can. If you do it hard, especially because we trimmed, there is definitely a chance that you could see this blue tip come through the fabric, which is absolutely not what we want. We do not want to break the fabric or the stitching on any of these corners. So just patience wins the game on this. Nice and slow, and do this for all 4 corners. And you'll see it bows a little bit because one side has the fusible fleece, so it's a little bit thicker than the other side. And we're going to fix that at the ironing board. Going to make sure these edges are even and these corners are even, and you're going to press that flat. Also, make sure you fold the open turned edge under so that you get a nice straight line across here. So because I know you know how to iron, I'm just going to go whip that up and I will be right back. Now I'm back from the ironing board and you can see I got that nice and flat, and I made sure that that seam line is right on the edge so you're not seeing any of the back fabric on the front or the front fabric on the back. And where I had left it open to turn, I have that pressed under so it is ready to go. Because all of the sewing from now on is going to show on both the front and the back, I am going to do my little pull up the bobbin trick. But hold on to the top thread, put your presser foot down, put your needle down, keep holding that thread, lift your needle, give that thread a little yank, and then I grab tweezers and I just pull that bobbin thread. So now I am holding both threads. I'm going to pull them back If your machine will do an automatic knot, you can do that. If not, just hold that. So about 2 or 3 stitches forward and then 2 or 3 stitches back, and that will lock your threads and you will never get one of those nasty bird's nests that happens if you don't hold that bobbin thread up. And now we're just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that we are closing this opening that we had for turning and just giving a nice finish to the edge. I always cut the beginning threads off before I get back to that spot so that they don't get tangled in the end threads when I go to finish this sewing. Let's talk a little bit about thread choice really quickly. So for this one, because I used a navy background on this main print and navy on the back, I used both a navy top thread and bobbin thread. But on these, I used different. So I used navy on the side that would be navy and a lighter blue here, just so that the stitching would all be really subtle. And on this one, I used this green for this side, so you don't really see it, and brown for this side. If I had used matching bobbin and top thread, you would either really see that seafoam green on this side or really see the brown stitching on this side. That is a choice you can make if you want the stitching to be part of your creativity. I just like it to blend. So now we have this all edge stitched, and the next thing we need to do is go back to our chart, and we're doing large, the 15-inch square, and the sides are each 2.5 inches high. So we are going to need to sew 2.5 inches from each edge all the way across. So it will intersect and create a little square in each corner. So there's 2 ways to do that. We can either draw lines on our fabric and sew along them, or we can set up guidelines and you can use the seam guides on your sewing machine to make sure you are 2.5 inches. I'm going to show you how to do both. So you basically need a ruler that is longer than the 15 inches. So I grabbed my 24-inch ruler, and then you can either just take a piece of tailor's chalk and draw that line, or you can use this little Choco marker, which is another way to get chalk. So I'm just going to place this 2.5 inches from the edge, and I'm going to draw a light line. If this was a lighter fabric, I might use a heat erasable pen. So I'm going to draw that on 2 sides. And then when we get to the sewing machine, I'm going to show you how we can do this by just setting up seam guides and not having to draw on the fabric. And again, kind of like we taped the ruler to fussy cut this. If you're doing a bunch of them to sew and sell or for holiday gifts or for yourself, I would recommend using the guidelines on your sewing machine so you don't have to draw 4 lines on every single one of these that you make. But I like to show you options and different ways to do things. So back to the sewing machine. Now, because we're doing the large one and you need to have your stitch line 2.5 inches in from the needle, that's a little bit longer than what is marked on here. So my guides go to about 2.25 inches. So we're going to need to do a little bit of work on our own. So I am going to take this ruler, I'm going to use a hand wheel, and I'm just going to put the needle almost all the way down. I'm going to make sure it is lined up with the 2.5 inch mark on the ruler. So now you can see this is the guideline that we need to set up. So washi tape to the rescue. You could also use painter's tape here. I'm just going to line that up so that it's right along the edge of the ruler. And then I can make sure it's straight because I can see that it's even with my metal plate. And I'm going to bring it down my sewing machine a bit, just so I have a longer guide to work with. This is going to be super easy to use if I am making a bunch of these. So now we are going to be sewing 4 lines, and I always try and start and do the knot or the forward and back from the edge stitching, not over the edge. And now I'm just going to use this guideline and go all the way to the other side. Now on this side, we have the chalk line, so I don't even have to worry, but the chalk line should keep me right along that edge as well. And what these stitch lines are doing is creating where the tray is going to fold. Now you can leave it just like this with just these pieces that are going to fold up to create the sides. But especially on the bigger ones, I feel like doing a little bit of quilting, even if you're just going this corner to this corner and doing an X, gives this more stability because you can take these and throw them in the laundry, use them over and over. So you want to make sure that things aren't going to get wrinkled and they're not going to separate from that fusible fleece. So a little bit of quilting is a good idea. This one, I could also, kind of do some machine quilting and go around the fish and everything, but we're just keeping it simple. So I am just going to go from corner to corner. Before you put your snaps in, you have to decide which is the outside because these buttons go on the outside. The male and female parts go on the inside. Now we know that we want this to be the inside of our tray because we fussy cut this very specifically to be the inside. But for a moment, let's pretend we don't know. We don't know if we want this to be the inside or if we want this to be the inside. So the way to figure that out is to just fold and clip this together so you can see it in both directions. See that? And that's going to be the outside. That's pretty cute. But maybe you want it to be this way and you would just do the same thing in this direction. For this one, we very specifically knew which was going to be the inside versus the outside. So that's what it would look like if that was the outside. This is too big of a print to be on the outside. But I can show you how it could make a difference. This one could have gone either way. I made it so the fish were on the inside and this print was on the outside. But I could have just as easily have done it this way, right? Where this is on the inside and the fish are on the. So if you got the templates, this makes it easy. I'll show you how to do it without them as well. I cut these out and I laminated them. There's one for each size of the tray. We are doing a large, and you will notice it shows you the corner. So you basically just line that up with the corner like that. And then you know exactly where to poke your holes. We're going to be using the awl, what I like to call a ice pick for fabric, and we're going to push straight through there to make the hole in the perfect spot on our corner. You're going to do that both sides. Be really careful. Do not poke your finger because this is very sharp. So that is super, super easy. Now, if you don't have the templates because you do not want me to have your email address or because you did not buy the pattern, I'm going to show you how to do it without. So you would place the snap heads down in these two corners, and you want to make sure they're not too close to the edge because you don't want them going through the seam allowance, and you want to make sure they're not going over that stitch line because this needs to fold. And so you can just kind of press that down, take a pen and mark that, and then you can take a ruler and figure out where you place that. So I basically did 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch from that stitch line. So if I put this on the stitch line 5/8 of an inch and I mark 1/2 inch, that is where I'm going to put my holes on that side. So you can do the ruler method, or you can get this template for free by signing up for my email list, or you can purchase the full tutorial with pictures that show you all the steps to do this in my Etsy shop. And both of those links will be below this video. Now I'm going to show you how you put these snaps on using the tool. So you take this backing, or button I call it, and you push it through the hole that you made, and then you push the fabric down so that that point is really sticking out. You need to make sure that point is out as much as it can, because when you put the male or female part on there and then use this tool to squeeze, what it does, it basically mushes that point so that it holds the two pieces together. So you can see here, you can still see the point. And then this is slightly curved and it rests in the black part. And then this pushes down on the other side. So you're going to hold it like that, hold these two pieces together. You're going to get the button part sitting inside that black. This should be totally over the male or the female piece. You shouldn't be able to see it. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now you can see that that point is now flattened inside there. So you're just going to do the same thing 8 times, but make sure you have one male and one female in each corner. And it is done. So this is how it stores. So easy, does not take up a lot of space, just a piece of fabric. And then when you want to use it, you simply snap these corners together. And then if you don't like it bowed out like that, just kind of fold those in on that stitch line and finger press that, and it's going to give it a better shape. But look how cute that is. So this is the large. And the large is a 9.5 inch square bottom with 2.5 inch sides. This is the medium with a 7.5 inch square bottom and 2 inch sides. And then this is the small with a 5.5 inch bottom and a 1 inch side. If you love simple sewing tutorials, quilting and learning new things, techniques, projects, etc., have patterns, I invite you to look at my membership site, sewwithtarareed.com. It is a lot of fun. If you like the things that I bring to you on my blog and on YouTube, you are going to love the membership program. So I will put a link to that below this video as well. Head over and take a look. Happy sewing. Let's get started on bowl cozies. Bowl cozies are one of my absolute favorite things. One of my friends made one of these for me a few years ago, and she's like, oh, everybody loves them. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is about. Now my husband and I use them every single day. It is cute, number one, but it is also a built-in pot holder. So if you're putting anything in the microwave, you put this in with it, and then you never have to touch a hot bowl. You just pull it out, take it wherever you're gonna go, keep it in there. It's also great for ice cream, like things that are really cold. People will use it for hot or cold. And one of my earlier videos and most popular videos was how to make them the way she taught me to make them, which was have these square ends. So the bowl still goes in there, but it's got squared ends, and it's a lot more complicated. It's a little bit more complicated because you're having to draw all the darts. And it's also more complicated because sewing over so many layers of stuff in points is harder, and you might break your needle more. But I'm going to give you tips for how to not break your needle. But if you do, just know you're in the Bowl Cozy Needle Breaking Club. Okay, so we are going to make them with these curved things. All right, so, oh yes, Christy, no more burning fingers. You have to add this to your list of obsessive things that you're doing. So now I'm going to show you all the stuff. And oh, I have to tell you this funny story. So one of my best friends, her daughter is obsessed. She's 8, and she's apparently obsessed with watching my videos. And she asked her mom, can I do a video? Can I do a craft video? And my friend's like, sure. And so she's like holding her phone. And she did this, and she's like, here's what you're gonna need, and this is what you're gonna need to do. And my friend's like, where'd you learn to do that? She's like, Tara, this is how you do it. So I'm so excited that I'm inspiring 8-year-old YouTubers. So let's talk about what we need to make these cool bowl cozies. Obviously, we need fabric for both sides. We'll talk about that in a minute. We need 2 layers of batting, and this is the Creative Grids template, and it comes with both sizes. So this is the one that I use the most. This is the one that holds the little bowl I've been showing you. This one makes a really big bowl cozy. Like that's gonna fit the serving bowl for your mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving. Okay, so you can make either of those sizes, and it comes with both templates. Then I always keep it in a little page protector, because you want to keep the directions, because it tells you exactly what size fabric that you need for making each of these. But another thing I love about Creative Grids is if you lose this, you just scan. They have these little QR codes on almost, maybe all of their rulers. I'm not 100% sure if it's all of them, but many of them. So you can just scan that, and it'll take you to their website, to the directions for how to use exactly what you have in your hot little hands. So that's cool. They also make pre-cut batting. I think she said this is sold out till January, which is a bummer, but it's just a kind of convenient. And I do have links under the video to find these if you want them. It's just one less thing you have to cut if you want to go that direction. And if you get pre-cut batting, you don't even necessarily need the templates, because you could just sew based on this. So I just wanted to show you that. Then I'm going to be using a rotating mat that spins, because it's fun and it's going to make it much easier. I think I need a ruler. Yes, I do need a ruler, a pencil and or a Sharpie, rotary cutter, pins and clips, and cotton, everything cotton. Did you hear me? Every single thing cotton. It's really important. Okay, back to my stuff. So the reason cotton, cotton, cotton is so important is because you can put these in the microwave and you do not want your things to melt, right? So if you use a fabric that has a metallic thread, like metallic threads in it, that could catch fire. That's probably like the worst thing you could do is a metallic fabric or a fabric with metallic. But even thread could melt. So you want to get cotton thread, and I just ran to Joann Fabric and grabbed what they had for colors that I wanted. And I just wanted to show you, like, these are two Gutermann. I hope I'm saying that right. And you'll notice they're different colors. So their cotton always has this like orangey yellow color. So that's how I know that that's a cotton fabric or cotton thread. This one is a blend. So this is polyester, or it might be 100% polyester. Yes, 100% polyester. Then this is a Coats and Clark. So just most companies do change colors based on the material of the thread. So just whatever kind of thread you like, figure out which one is cotton and make sure you use that so it doesn't melt. You'll also need an iron sewing machine, obviously. Okay. Hi, Linda. How are you? She made it. She made it. Okay, let me grab. I'm going to talk a little bit about fabrics. So, no, first, wait. Sorry. I have my notes, but now I'm going out of order a little bit. We're going to talk about batting because this, to me, can be the most confusing part of it all. You need to have 100% cotton batting, but some batting says white cotton batting. And so to me, I was like, oh, I can use that. But then let me look at it more closely. This, if it says with stabilizing scrim, it probably has polyester in it. So do not use that. This is the kind of batting you would use for a quilt. Unless the batting says 100% natural cotton or 100% cotton batting, do not use it. So cotton batting, not good enough. 100% cotton, Wrap and Zap. This is from Pellon. They basically market it to do things like this. You can make little bags to make your baked potatoes, to do these things. This is the Gypsy Quilter. The people that own Creative Grids also own, I think, Gypsy Quilter. And I just want to show you really quick the difference. I've made them with both, but I really am liking this Gypsy Quilter. It's called Hoop Easy. So it's designed for machine embroidery. And it's going to hoop easy, apparently. But if you look at it, compared to this, it's a little bit thinner. I hope you can, hold on, let me find a better cut edge. Okay, can you see this? You see that? Somebody tell me if you can see that. I'm going to zoom in. It's the beauty of being your own cameraman. So this is the Gypsy Quilter. And this is the Wrap and Zap. So both are going to work. One is just going to be a little bit easier to sew with because it's thinner, but it's still going to do the job. So this is what we are going to work with. I also love that it comes on a roll. It is 18 inches wide. So what you need for, turn this around. So for the small one that we're going to do, you need an 11-inch square. You need two 11-inch squares of batting. For the larger one, you need two 16-inch squares. So what I did was I just unrolled it. I cut the squares. I'm not going to make you watch me cut that. So I have my square. And then this is the size that I had left. And as luck would have it, this is the perfect size for next week when we're going to be doing mug rugs. I'll talk about that later, but mug rugs will be made with that. So now we're going to talk about the fabric that we're going to use. So you can do all kinds of things. You can do the same fabric on both sides. And one thing I love about this is they're reversible. So you can just flip it like that and put whichever side you want on the inside or the outside. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Hello, Iron Stitches. If I pause, it's because I'm jack of all trades here. I'm doing all the cameras and I'm also checking the chat. The 12-inch, Marina, the 12-inch will work for this size, which to me is the most used size, but you can get the 18-inch if you want as well. She had gotten some of this gypsy quilter batting. So you could do 2 pieces of fabric that are just a piece of fabric, and one for the inside, one for the outside. That's going to be your easiest. Now you'll notice this is directional fabric. And if you watch many of my videos, you know I love to tell you the pros and cons of using directional fabric. And of course, there are pros and cons with this project as well. So I'm going to show you with this one. I hope my son's not watching. I made him this one for Christmas. We're from Philadelphia. Go Eagles. So I got some Eagles fabric and I just did a piece on each side. So it looks great from the top because everything's in the right direction. But if you look at the sides, it's right side up on this side, but it's upside down on this side, which isn't a huge deal because it's not like you're really staring at the sides of this, but it's just food for thought, something to think about. Another thing I wanted to comment on for this is if you use licensed fabric, so sports, Disney, Harry Potter, like movie stuff, kid stuff, always look at the selvage. So this fabric, whoever made it, licensed it from the NFL. They paid a lot of money to be able to do so. And it says right here, this is for individual consumption only. Any unauthorized use is prohibited and illegal. Do not believe, let me go back, I'm going to lecture you. Do not believe what you hear and see on Etsy or in a lot of Facebook groups, okay? This is one of my core things is legality of this stuff because I make a living by people respecting my copyrights. And so I want other people to understand what the legal jeopardy could be if they are like, oh, everyone else is selling stuff made out of Eagles fabric on Etsy, so it's totally fine. It's actually not fine at all. You can use this for yourself. So I can make this and give it to my son, and that's totally legal because it's individual use. If I put this in an Etsy shop and sell it or take it to a craft show and sell it, I risk the lawyers for the NFL coming after me. And I can assure you they have more money for lawyers than I do. So just be aware of that if you like to sew and sell things. It's very tempting because everybody wants Disney and everything else, but just they have more money for lawyers than you. Okay, that's the end of my little please don't get in legal jeopardy chat. So get my board back up here. So this is one fabric. So if we put it on the outside, one side would be upside down, one side wouldn't be. But I loved doing this little 4-way with it, where I did the 2-patch. So this is how I did that. So the directions say you need an 11-inch square for the outside and the inside. So I basically took 4 pieces of fabric and made sure that after I sewed them together, it was an 11-inch square. So I needed 2, wait a minute, that's not right. 5 1/4, because you're only losing 1/4 inch. 5 1/4, 4 of those. My notes were wrong. So you can have a lot of fun with that. You could do, so this one, I just did 2 fabrics. You could do 4 different fabrics and kind of alternate the colors. Let's see, what else did I cut out? Do it like that. Do it like that. 3 different fabrics. So lots of fun ways to do that. Now I will tell you, the first time when I made this one, I made way more work for myself because what I did was I'm just telling you so you don't do it. I took this template and I added a 1/4 inch to the folded edge, and I cut each of these pieces of fabric to the curve. And then when I was done that, I thought, wow, that was crazy, Tara. It would be a lot easier if you just made the square already put together and then folded it and cut it. So I don't want you to go down the longer road. Yep, no pelling, you did not. And part of the reason we're going back to the copyright stuff and the legality of sewing and selling with big brand licensed fabric is when they license, like they're licensing that design for fabric, and they have probably licensed to somebody else for, say, aprons. So if people go buy the fabric and start selling a bunch of aprons, that puts the NFL in a sticky wicket with the people who have licensed it for aprons, because they're supposed to be the only people that can sell aprons. So that's part of why it is that way. But let's get back to sewing. So we're going to use this fabric, and I'm going to put this fabric on the inside because I think directional looks really cute on the inside. Not as much of a fan of it on the outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in quarters. Apparently I'm shedding on my fabric. And just really finger press it. You want it to have a nice crease. Got to make sure I'm going to be able to spin with wild abandon here. All right, let me zoom in a little bit more. Get this where I want it. Okay, so it's folded. Now I feel like I'm doing a magic trick. You can see the folds, 1, 2. Now we are going to take the template, and it says folded edge, folded edge. So I'm going to line them up as directed with the folded edges. If you aren't quite on the edge, it's not quite going to work as well. So really try and get that on the folded edge. But this has great, they have this patented grip, which is great. But then you're also going to be holding your hand and keep your hand down flat. I would also recommend, especially if you're going to do a lot of these, to put a new rotary blade in your cutter, because it is harder. If your blade isn't really sharp, it's a little harder, especially to cut curves. And it's definitely going to be harder to cut curves when we get to the fleece part. Let's see. Ooh, sorry, I'm looking at comments. So Leela did a, what did you do? She bought fabric that said it was 100% cotton and did a burn test to confirm, and it didn't pass. Wow, that's scary. Tell me how long you put it in. I have had, like my mother-in-law, I make flaxseed things that, you know, those heat pads. And if you put them in too long, it will burn. But that also adds heat from the inside. So while it's not supposed to burn, I don't know, did you put it in for like 20 minutes? Then that might. I have never had that problem. Okay, so new rotary blade. I always start on a dart and cut that off. And then I twist this so that I'm starting straight. Sometimes I can get it to do the curve well in one cut. Sometimes I can tell I'm not quite staying on the edge of the template, so I will do 2 cuts. And I always do 2 to 3 cuts for the fleece. So let's just see how this goes. And keep your fingers back because you don't want to slip and cut your fingers off. So you just go slow. Okay, I'm doing it. And see how that cut nicely because I just changed the blade. Close the blade. I just changed the blade the other day. When I was making my samples, I had kind of a dull blade, and this never cut all the way. It was like 2 little pieces, and I always had to go over it a few times. So sharp blade is the key to success here. And then you just cut that other dart. And voila, we have our shape. So now I'm just going to do the same exact thing with the batting. And this is why I really like this thinner stuff, especially when I'm using this template, because it's still pretty thick when you fold it to be 4 layers. So we're going to put the folded edge, so I have my fold, just like I did there. But you can see how much fatter that is. Well, maybe you can't. See, that's a lot more to cut through. And it would be even more if I was using the Wrap and Zap. Okay, so this one I am probably going to do at least 2 cuts. So I usually go straight, and then I go like that, and I can feel it starting to not cut through all the layers right there at that curve. So then I just go straight off like that, and see, it didn't quite work. And then I'll just come back in. I figure if I have to do it 3 times to get a pretty good curve, it's better than having it really not work as well. But we don't have to be super particular about it, but the better all 4 layers cut, the better it is going to line up with the fabric that we cut. All right, and that, because you are like I'm moving this so much, that is why I really like this rotary mat for this project. Because if I had to move this like this, it would be a lot harder to keep it all lined up consistently. Okay. Oh, okay, we have more news from Leela about her fabric test. She lit it with a lighter. Yeah, I mean, if you set cotton on fire, like with a flame, it's going to burn. But it's not going to catch fire in a microwave with normal use. All right. Hi, Jen. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but I was telling everyone how excited I was to be inspiring your daughter to be a YouTube star. Made me so happy. So now we have the fabric and the batting cut basically just a teeny bit off to the same size. Yay. So you would do that twice. I'm only going to show you how to do the 1/2, and I have pre-prepped the other half so we won't be here all night. Then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take a ruler and you're going to draw a diagonal line. And I'm just going to do diagonal. If you want to do fancier quilting, go for it. I don't really think you need to do it. You can see in this one, there's diagonal line, and I sewed them with thread that matched, so they kind of blend in, but that should be plenty. You might want to do a little bit more if you're doing the big one, but we're just going to go for, let's get these done, because all of a sudden everybody's going to want them. And then I'm going to take a pencil and draw that line. Now, another way I've done it is I have tried a Sharpie, and so that when I'm sewing, the fabric is on the bottom and the fleece is on the top. Oh, and another thing to note, because this is folded, you can kind of see where the center is. And then if you put these points on the 3-inch mark on your ruler, you're going to get pretty much right down the center. So you can do this either way. I think their directions say to draw it on the front. I kind of like doing this because then I'm not putting fleece on my feed dogs and getting as much fuzz in my sewing machine. And you can see it a lot better. So you know what? We're going to do it. We're going to do it my way today. Then I just throw some pins in here, far enough away from the lines so that they're not, I can just keep sewing and I won't have to take the pins out. Actually, I lied. We're not going to do it my way. I would do it my way if I had blue bobbin thread, but I don't have blue bobbin thread ready, and I don't have blue bobbin thread in my sewing machine. And who wants to wait for me to do a bobbin? So we're going to do it from the front. Whoop. Oh, thank you. Is it Leela? Layla? Yeah, Kate, I'm with you. No, we're going to fleece in my feed dogs for the moment. And I will say, whenever you're doing this, you definitely want to clean your machine pretty regularly. All right. Now, when it comes to thread, we talked about how it needs to be cotton, but let's talk about color. So you can do different things with color. Like I just showed you, you can have the color, the stitching blend. So the stitching isn't showing up, right? It's not glaring at you. I hope I did another example. And I actually even did that in this one. I used cream and green and brown so that it wouldn't show. Apparently that's my preference. I thought I did one where it didn't match. Yeah, that one still pretty much matches. Anyway, you can visualize. Like if I were to do brown, you know what? Okay, sorry. We're going to go back to the other way because that's going to show you what I thought I could show you. I have brown in my bobbin, so I'm going to sew on the top. I'm going to pin really fast. Sorry. Be patient with me, you guys. It's worth it because then you can see all the options without having to do your own testing. All right, now I'm going to switch over to camera 2, wake my sewing machine back up. And I do have a walking foot on my sewing machine, which basically, like, you got the feed dogs on every sewing machine down here. And then a walking foot basically puts extra feed dogs that come from the top. So it helps move everything. It's not as important on this step, but it is going to make a difference when we sew this all together. So I'm just going to sew down these 2 lines. Now, if you were making a full one, because I'm only making half a one right now because I already made the other half, or you were making multiple, you could daisy chain these, which basically means instead of stopping and cutting the thread like I just did at the end of each one, you could just move from one to the other, if you're not familiar with that term. So scrim, somebody wants to know what scrim is. Scrim is, I wrote it down. It's basically, so scrim is basically some polyester threads that get woven through the batting to help it be stabilized. And with batting, you kind of get what you pay for. So you also need to pay attention. Let me grab my thing again. Okay, so, sorry, didn't get all my coughing done. So you also need to pay attention to stitch distance. So this one, I can stitch 10 inches apart when I'm doing the quilting. I have it now flying around. And everything will be good. So I could, stitch 10 inches apart. I can wash the quilt. I can love it. I can use it, and it's going to be good. Now, if I had a less expensive batting and it said stitch distance 4 inches apart, I've seen anywhere from 4 to 10 inches. And I stitched 7 inches apart or 10 inches apart with that. Over time, and especially with washing, you would start to feel the batting coming apart inside the quilt and the project. So scrim is just something that they put in there to kind of help stabilize it all. And the more and the better the scrim, the farther apart you can quilt. Okay, back to, I'm trying to get consistent about which cameras I put on which things so they don't have to pay super close attention every time. So here is this is the back. And then here's the perfect example of using an alternate thread. So you really see that, and that's going to become kind of part of the look of this bowl cozy. Whereas this one, it's blue and it's not noticeable at all. So totally personal preference, as long as you're using 100% cotton. That is my only non-negotiable for you. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold it. Now, one thing I love about this is the darts are pre-cut. The template cuts them for you. In the tutorial where I show you how to make this, you're grabbing a ruler and you're measuring 1 inch over and 1.5 inches down, and you're drawing lines, and it takes a lot more time. Definitely worth buying this template just to not have to do that. So we're going to fold this together with the fabric right sides together. And that is going to line up these 2 darts. And now I'm going to take you back to the sewing machine. We're going to sew each dart. So these 2, and then once they're sewn, we're going to, like a cootie catcher kind of, open it and flip it that way and sew the other 2. And again, if you were doing more than one, you could be daisy chaining this, but we're just doing this one. And if you're not familiar, when I say daisy chaining, it would mean putting another one in right now, and you would only have like 2 stitches in between each of them, instead of cutting, pulling it, and having this big piece of thread and everything starting over again. Now, one thing to notice, and I got to make sure you can see it. Sometimes when you fold this part, the fabric in here, gets a little folded, like it doesn't stay flat against the fleece. So whenever I do it, I always kind of put my finger in there and make sure everything is flat and not puckered, because if it's puckered, you're going to get a big old pucker on the outside, but it is on the bottom. So if you do, life is not going to end, but it's just something to know. It's one thing I love about sewing. I really cannot think of many life-altering things that could happen other than cutting yourself really bad or sewing through your finger. So these 2 sides are done. So it's like a half a bowl. So now I'm going to fold it the opposite way, and it doesn't fold as flat, obviously, because we have these sticking up. So just kind of look at that one, line them up. You can kind of feel there, make sure that that fabric is nice and flat. And then sew these 2. And I'm telling you, you should make these for everyone on your holiday list. I have made these for some people, and they text me almost every time they use them. Or like every month, like, oh, we're using these things again. We love them. My husband stole mine. Can I have another one? Hey, can you make me a seasonal one? These are like definite crowd pleasers. Or if you like to sew and sell stuff, I think these would sell really well. I don't know what you would price them for. I would say, I don't know, at least $10 to $12. You'd have to look at what your material costs are. So now we have this all puffed up, just like this one. I'm just going to cut some of these threads off. So you don't have to cut the darts, you don't have to trim the darts, it's just nice and quick. Now the next thing we're going to do, I'm going to require my fabric clips. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Do you guys have fabric clips? Let me know in the comments. I love fabric clips. They never poke me, and they're really quick and easy for projects like this. Now, before we clip this together, I always check the outside because every once in a while, like you don't quite cut it right and there's maybe a 1/4 inch of fabric beyond the fleece. You want it pretty lined up. So you would just trim a little bit. Like I could just see trim like this a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip one inside out and keep this one right side out. Does not matter which, because these are, again, reversible. And I'm going to put that inside so the fabrics are right sides together. And I'm going, oh, you know what? Hold on. I lied. I'm skipping a step. So this is what we need to do. We need to iron these open so that they aren't all bulky and bumpy inside. So let me just do that really quickly. Nope, I already made one of these. So we're just going to go with this one. And I ironed it. So make sure you do that step of ironing those darts open. We will need the iron again, but we're not going to get slowed down yet. So now you're going to line up the bottom of the darts. That's what you do first. So you put a clip at each dart. If you don't have clips, you can use pins. I just find these to be so quick and easy. What are you? Finding these to be different size. All right, keep on going. Okay, so Mary has clips, but she uses them to hold labels more than for sewing. And yeah, I definitely use them more for when I'm doing quilting. I don't use them much. I usually use pins because you have to be a lot more precise. But for a lot of my other projects, like this especially, I'm a clip girl. So we have the four seams lined up. And then as you can see, I'm just kind of moving it and making sure it's all organized so that it's evenly dispersed. And now I'm going to do that look at the other side thing again, and you can see this one is pretty far. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. So I am going to trim that because I really want these to be about the same size. And nobody's going to come through and know that I trimmed anything. Wait, what do I do now? So anyway, you can do that. Then I always put a clip on each top. And now when you are sewing, sometimes you get on a roll and you don't realize where you are, right? You don't realize that you're close to the front. Okay, so Suzanne has seen these for sale in the New Orleans area, and they're usually $10. Okay, well, there you go. People always ask me how much. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't sold them. So we do need to leave a section open for turning. And it's a little bit of a bear. I'm not going to lie to you. That's the one thing about this is turning it right side out. Because I only like to turn on straightaways and I try and avoid turning on curves whenever possible. So this is where I'm going to turn it. And you'll notice I put 2 clips here because I'm going to start here at the dart. And I'm going to sew all the way around. And when I see 2 clips, I know, ooh, I'm back to the beginning because I have been known to sew all the way and then had to get out my seam ripper, blah, blah, blah. I know that's what they're for, but if I can avoid using them, I do. So now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew and give you a couple tips as we go. So tip number 1. Well, I don't want to not, well, no, I can do that. Tip number 1, we're going to start at that seam line and I'm going to go forward and back to a few, like I'm going to go more than I normally would because there's going to be a lot of pressure on that. So see how I basically sewed that forward. There'll be a lot of pressure on that point when we go to turn this. And if you don't do a lot of curves, just go slow. You can, and if you also feel like you're not getting a good curve, you can decrease your stitch size. I'm using a 2.4 right now and it's working very nicely. Now, when you get to your next dart, sometimes it sticks up a little bit, right? Like that's not going to want to go under the foot. Do not use your finger to hold it down. Use the tip of scissors. I keep these scissors. I used the sticky part of a command strip, and I put a circle magnet on the front of my sewing machine. And so these scissors live on my sewing machine because you constantly lose scissors. So I always have them, and I get very upset when I move them away from my sewing machine. Now I'm going to stop where my needle is in the seam. So it's right in that seam line. I'm going to lift the foot, and I'm going to turn or pivot. I like to call it pivot. It's my own sewing version of Ross from Friends and his sofa. So you kind of look at this as sewing 4 individual sections. Each curve can pretty much lay flat like that, and then you're pivoting in between each one. I didn't do a very good job pressing that, but it's more the fleece that you want, or the batting that you want to have open. It's more important than the fabric. All right, and if you guys are asking me questions, I can't see the comments while I'm at the sewing machine, so I will answer you when I'm done this part. And ask anything, there are no stupid questions, and this is way more fun for me and everybody else if we are chatting and you're basically telling me what you want to know instead of me assuming and guessing what I want to tell you. Okay, so I hit those 2, and now I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go back and forth and cut that. So, traditional way to clip curves is to take scissors, and you might want to like cut a little bit closer, and you just kind of snip, snip, snip from the outside to just before the stitching on all those curves. Takes forever, and it starts to hurt my thumb. But that's like the traditional way to do it. Here's my cheater way. Well, first, the cheater way doesn't work in this part. So I do use my scissors, and sometimes I can't quite get it to close when it's really thick like that. So I'll just really carefully cut from further down the scissor without cutting the stitching. So I'm going to cut into here. And the reason you have to clip curves like that is because when you turn it right side out, you need the fabric to open a little bit, because if it's solid, you're not going to get a good curve. Oh my gosh, they're so, yep. Marina, you read my mind. We're going to use pinking shears, but I can't ever get the pinking shear to go quite over this really fat part, so I do that first at the darts. I love pinking shears. And I love these Fiskars pinking shears because they're way easier on your hand. They're called shoot, what are they called? There's a link under the video to them. I think it's like quick release, or I don't know. So I always use pinking shears to cut curves. And I like to do it right over my little trash bin so I don't end up, especially for this, with fuzz and fabric all around. So using pinking shears, you're just going to go around, make sure you do not hit the stitching, and trim those. It's so much easier on your hand. Oh, I did get it on that part. And that's why I love these too, because you're squeezing like this. It's a lot easier on the tendon of your thumb than a more traditional scissor where you put your thumb in a circle and your finger in a circle. That was a very unpaid advertisement for Fiskars. Any kind of scissors that they have that have this action, I own. That's from back in my scrapbooking days in the early 90s when I first discovered that kind of scissor. Now, do not cut your opening, because if you were to cut along the place where we need to turn this right side out, you wouldn't have enough to press inside and stitch. So you always skip the part that has no stitching. That is super, super important. Okay, now I'm going to just turn this right side out through this very tiny hole. And the way I like to do it so there's less pressure on where it is sewn together is you push the first part under and then take this spot, right, where it's stitched, and flip it over like that. So it's facing down, and you do that on both sides, and then you're not going to put as much strain on that stitching as you pull this all right side out. Oh, this one's going pretty well. I really fought with one the other day. Then just use your fingers and kind of rub them along those curves to start getting that turned right side out nicely. Whew, that iron's heating up. And just like with the sewing, we're going to look at it as 4 different sections. So let me get my iron over here. And I'm using a wool pressing mat. I don't know if you have used these before. It basically helps push the heat back up. So when you're doing quilt blocks, it's great to get a really crisp, precise fold. And for something that's thicker, it just helps it really crease better. So I'm going to do this first curve first, and I just lay it down so that it's pretty flat, like that whole little piece of the pie. And then I go through and I rub back and forth with my fingers to make sure that seam is on the edge and that curve looks really good before I ever touch it with the iron. And I don't have one of my favorite things, my quilter's clapper, handy, but we don't really need it. Okay, so then I'm just going to do all 4 of these. I do the 3 that don't have the opening first, and I do the one with the opening last. For you, welcome. She's often at a meeting and didn't think they would want to listen to me live at her meeting. Whatever. All right, so everyone in the United States, you got big plans for Thanksgiving. Will you be elbow deep in a turkey next week, or are you gonna take some time and come play with me? My sister-in-law is always in charge of Thanksgiving, so I was like, I'll just do it for anybody that doesn't have anything going on Wednesday night. And then in December, I'm gonna do a Saturday. I had someone from England ask me, can you please do something where it's not the middle of the night for me? So December 7th will be my 5th live sewing for holiday thing. Okay, so now we're to the part that we have to do a little bit more work. So first I'm going to press the half that is sewn really well. And then I'm just going to, and this is a little bit on the curve, not a lot. We basically just need to get that folded under 1/4 inch. It wants to go under more. And make sure that part, like right there on the edge, gets all tucked in. But you'll see it's a little bit straighter. So you just want to fuss with it before you press it, because once you press it, it's harder to fix it. It's easier to just fuss with the shape now. Okay, we're just going to call that good. Oh, Linda, are you having Thanksgiving a day early? Because I am doing it on Wednesday. I'm not doing it on Thanksgiving night. I'm doing it the night before. I wasn't sure if that was going to be a good or bad thing. So now we have this all pressed. I'm going to take it back to the sewing machine, and our last step is to simply sew around it. Okay, somebody clear this up for me. Is this called top stitching or edge stitching? I swear people tell me both things. So if you know the difference between top stitching and edge stitching and would like to fill me in and everyone else so that I know once and for all, please drop that in the comments. I was looking at this and I noticed like it's very puffy here at these darts because I didn't really iron that. So I'm going to go get that flat. You want that as flat as possible for not breaking your needle. All right, so because we are top stitching or edge stitching or whatever, sewing around the outside, and you will see the back, we're going to do the pull up the bobbin trick. So I'm holding the top thread, put my needle down, keep holding the top thread, pick my needle up, give it a little tug. So now my bobbin thread, which happens to be brown, because I have brown on this other side, so I'm doing 2 different color threads so that they blend in with the sides that they're sewing. And now I'm holding my top thread and my bobbin thread. I'm going to do like 2 stitches or 3, and then I'm going to go backwards. So now I'm just going to sew around. Did you see how that wasn't really moving very well? Walking foot was not activated. All right, I don't know if you can see it from the angle, but there's here that kind of goes back and forth. And I'm just going to go really slowly. Now, when I get to this dart, it is really thick and hard. So I'm going to go really slowly so that I don't break my needle. If you want to change your needle, you might want to try like a jeans needle because they're designed for thicker fabrics, but I did not do that, so we're just going to go slow. And we're going to stop, just like when we sewed them together, we're going to stop right in that seam and twist or pivot and then keep going. You can go a little bit faster when you're on the curves, except I went so fast I wasn't consistent. Oh well. We're going with done is better than perfect. Now here comes another big old lump, so I'm going to go nice and slow. Pivot. So what this is doing is it's going to give it a more finished look. It's going to make it hold together better if you ever wash them, and you will. And you're going to get really sad the first time somebody gets spaghetti sauce in theirs. My husband got in big trouble when he did that. But as my friend pointed out, it's fabric, throw it in the laundry. I'm like, okay, whatever. But this is also going to close the section that we used for turning. Now, I hope you can see that this is where we started. And I always cut these threads off before I get back to the starting position on any of my projects, because we have taken such care to not have a bird's nest under here that I don't all of a sudden want that to get caught up in the top and make a mess because I wasn't paying attention. Clip that off. I'm so happy it's done. So as I showed you in the beginning, these are reversible. So I can have the bowl here, or I can have the bowl here, either way. So that's it. That is how it works. It's done. I hope you found some ideas that you like to take for your next event. And I hope that when you leave, the host or hostess are talking about you because you gave them the most unique and wonderful gift of all. And if you find out what they thought of it, let me know in the comments. I would also love to know what you created, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for lots more ideas and tutorials for all occasions.